Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. The longest government shutdown in history is finally over as President Trump signs a bill to restore federal funding. How lawmakers are reacting to the bill's passage.
Air travel could be slowly returning to normal after the government shutdown as flight reductions stay at 6% and air traffic controllers begin receiving their back pay.
Congress moves to release Jeffrey Epstein records, forcing a House vote that could reveal new details about the convicted sex offenders network.
As the U.S.-China trade truce takes shape, a bipartisan group on Capitol Hill exposing how the Chinese regime uses predatory practices to control the global supply of critical minerals.
DHS says more than 150 illegal immigrant sex offenders were apprehended during an operation in Florida. Secretary Newsom says she wants the operation to be replicated around the country.
And we're going to be taking a timely look at why younger adults are seeing lower credit scores and what they can do to rebuild it fast.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephania Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Today's Thursday, November 13th. This is NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, after a record 43 days, the nation's longest government shutdown is now over.
Indeed it is. President Trump signed a funding bill very late last night, ending over a month of government furloughs for workers and delays in air travel all across the country. Here are the details.
President Trump signed a stopgap bill around 10:25 p.m. last night, officially reopening the federal government and restoring pay for hundreds of thousands of federal employees.
Today we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion, because that's what it was. In just a moment, I'll sign a bill exactly like we asked Democrats to send us all along, many days ago.
The motion is adopted.
The House cleared the measure 222 to 209, with 6 Democrats joining Republicans to end the standoff. The fight that triggered the shutdown centered on the expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits. Democrats wanted an immediate extension. Republicans said the issue should be debated later. But the stopgap bill cleared the Senate earlier this week without an extension. Going into the House vote, some Democrats criticized the bill.
I think it is a raw deal for the American people.
After the vote, Speaker Mike Johnson gave credit to the GOP for not wavering.
We feel very relieved tonight. The Democrat shutdown is finally over, thanks to House and Senate Republicans who stood together to get the job done.
Congressman Don Davis, a Democrat who broke ranks to back the funding bill, defended his vote last night, but said the fight would continue.
People are hurting out there. I mean, they're getting hit with costs. Their parents trying to raise kids. Farmers been hit. I mean, this is not over by any means.
President Trump also used the moment to renew his call to end the Senate filibuster, saying the rule enables partisan gridlock.
I hope we can all agree that the government should never be shut down again, end the filibuster, terminate the filibuster. It'll never happen again.
The bill ensures funding for major departments and food assistance programs through next fall, but only extends funding for the rest of the federal government till the end of January. The same healthcare fight could spark another shutdown when that temporary runs out. After the House vote yesterday, Speaker Johnson declined to commit on a vote to extend Affordable Care Act subsidies.
With the government shutdown now over, officials and travelers are hoping the nation's airports and flight schedules will soon return to normal.
That's right. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest from the aviation industry.
Transport Secretary Sean Duffy announced yesterday that flight reductions will remain frozen at 6%, a move meant to stabilize operations while the FAA works to restore normal service. The pause halts a planned increase to 8% and then 10% cuts as the agency reviews staffing and system performance. In a statement, Secretary Duffy said, "President Trump's message has been heard loud and clear. Controllers will be made whole quickly." Duffy says controllers will receive 70% of their back pay within 48 hours of the shutdown ending. Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian says that he hopes airline travel will be back close to normal by tomorrow, speaking on Bloomberg.
Once people start getting paid, and I know Secretary Duffy is committed to getting those paychecks out right away. So over the next couple of days, I think you'll see things starting to turn to normal.
United CEO Scott Kirby discussed how long it will take their operations to resume back to full capacity, speaking on the Katie Miller podcast.
We'll be able to ramp up as quickly as the FAA. FAA is going to be the constraint. And by the way, I think the FAA deserves an A+. They've done a great job in a really uncertain, they don't know how many people are going to show up to work. They want to keep the system safe. I was 100% supportive of what they did.
Southwest Airlines echoed that view, telling employees yesterday it's optimistic the FAA will soon allow U.S. carriers to resume full schedules. During the 43-day shutdown, air traffic controllers worked without pay, and staffing shortages mounted at facilities nationwide, causing widespread flight disruptions. Since October 1st, tens of thousands of flights have been delayed or canceled, affecting more than 1.2 million passengers last weekend alone. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And as we heard earlier, late last night, President Trump signed a bill passed by both chambers of Congress to fund the government through January, formally bringing an end to the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Joining us now to discuss is Jeffrey Bloodworth. He's a professor for modern American political history with Gannon University. Jeffrey, good to see you, and thanks for joining. After 43 days, how do you put this chapter of history into perspective?
Well, it's just another chapter in the the Democrats versus Donald Trump. I wasn't surprised that this lasted for 40 days. I honestly thought this could go on through Christmas. The Democratic Party donations and popularity ratings are tied to opposing Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is not one who's given to conceding easily. So this is part of the past in his first term, and I think we'll see more of this in the next 3 years.
You shared a really interesting insight that the Democratic Party at present, its popularity is tied to an anti-Trump narrative. As his term progresses and he racks up some undeniable political victories, putting out wars, etc., do you see that flipping? And in particular, tied to this shutdown, were there any winners and losers besides, of course, the federal workers themselves?
There were lots of losers in the government shutdown. So this is the rub, is that Democratic activists, in terms of like donations and those who will volunteer for you or vote for you in the primary, they want Democrats to oppose Donald Trump avidly and vigorously. But most Democratic voters are normies, right? I mean, they may not like Donald Trump at all times, but they don't cotton to kind of maximum resistance. And most voters are normie voters. I mean, they might see certain things from Washington and Donald Trump, and they might object here and there, and they might side with Democrats on particular issues. But the vast majority of voters, including Democrats, don't support maximum resistance. And, this is the danger of Democrats overplaying their hand. As you say, Donald Trump has had some successes in his first year in office, depending on who you are. Republicans would say more. Democrats might say less, but he's had successes. And maximum resistance, especially if the economy goes well and Donald Trump is able to rack up more victories, that's going to redound against the Democrats who do the maximum resistance.
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about the shutdown, but you bring up such a fascinating point that, when this story broke earlier this week about the BBC very clearly doctoring footage to make it look like Trump incited violence when clearly he said peacefully, do those, as you called them, normie Democrats, maybe does that, anti-Trump at all costs, does that start to, lose the plot a little bit for some of those centrist Democrats? I mean, we're seeing this happen within the Democratic Party itself, where you almost have two parties within a party.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're going to have some centrist Democrats, especially depending on their districts and states, who, they rely on winning Trump voters in order to win office, or they understand they also represent Trump voters. And look, in Democrats in 2028, like Biden in 2020, in order to win, you're going to have to peel off Trump voters. And so maximum resistance and things such as, the BBC doctoring the evidence is only going to undermine the credibility of anyone who's saying, I oppose the president on X and Y, when, there is proof out there that the legacy media at times has not always given Donald Trump a fair shake. I mean, both things can be true, that Donald Trump can make mistakes in office, right? Like any president can pursue bad policy. But when certain parts of the legacy media has been unfair to Donald Trump, it undermines the ability of Trump's opponents to effectively counter him. The BBC story, it helps Donald Trump because it plays into the narrative that I think a lot of Republicans believe, that no matter what Donald Trump does, he will be opposed by certain parts of the establishment.
Yeah, and Jeffrey, just as we finish up in our last 30 seconds, what was the tipping point in the Senate?
Oh, I just, the airline lines. I mean, people not being able to get home for Thanksgiving, the SNAP benefits. I mean, phones would have just blown up if people couldn't get home for Thanksgiving. Look, those Democrats who voted for the bill, they're also covering for a lot of Democrats who voted against the bill because they're trying to please their base, but privately very much knew the shutdown needed to end. I mean, there's a lot more consensus in Congress than what we see in the votes. I think most people in the Democratic Party understood that their point was made that the shutdown needed to be over. It's just that the activist wing of the Democrats didn't fully accept that.
Yeah, very tough job for Schumer indeed to navigate those flanks of his party. Really appreciate your analysis this morning, and good to see you, Jeffrey Bloodworth.
Thank you.
And a major move in Congress could force the release of government records tied to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
A discharge petition in the House has reached the 218 signatures needed to compel a vote on the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
Arizona Democrat Adelita Grijalva became the final signature yesterday, joining all Democrats and 4 Republicans: Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and Nancy Mace. The bill calls for the Justice Department to release unclassified records involving Epstein, his convicted associate Ghislaine Maxwell, and others linked to his crimes.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says he plans to bring the bill to a vote next week. The White House yesterday accused House Democrats of selectively leaking emails related to Epstein that referenced President Trump and of failing to provide full context to create a fake narrative to smear the president.
Forced organ harvesting, the shocking practice of killing people to take their organs, is once again in focus.
Lawmakers from 28 countries are joining forces to push for tougher laws against this practice.
The Interparliamentary Alliance on China said yesterday that its members condemn the abhorrent practice of China's state-sanctioned organ harvesting and trafficking. The group says it will push for bans on transplant tourism, sanctions on perpetrators, and greater transparency in transplant systems worldwide.
Forced organ harvesting in China is mostly committed against prisoners of conscience. Its scale ballooned after the turn of the century, correlating closely with the Chinese regime's persecution of Falun Gong or Falun Dafa. The spiritual discipline is based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance.
The practice was first introduced to China in 1992 and quickly grew to an estimated 70 to 100 million followers by 1999.
And in that same year, the Chinese Communist Party launched a nationwide campaign to eradicate the faith group.
And as the trade truce between the U.S. and China takes shape, the U.S. is eyeing ways to combat China's dominance over rare earth and critical minerals. NTD's Melina Weisskopf joins us now. Melina, good to see you. A report was released overnight on this topic. Give us the highlights.
Hi, Steph. Good morning. So this bipartisan report was from lawmakers on the House's Select Committee on the CCP. Essentially, it exposes how China is using predatory practices to dominate the critical mineral industry. Now, the key point is predatory. Here, China rose to dominance in the critical mineral space, not through fair competition, but through those practices, which has caused Americans to lose their jobs, their businesses, and jeopardize U.S. national security. Now, that's exactly what the regime aimed to do, was to force Western companies out of the critical mineral market and to hurt our economies. In the words of the China Committee Chairman John Molinar, as we saw last month with its rule on rare earths, China has a loaded gun that's pointed at our economy, and we must act quickly. Now, one example of how the CCP has done this is noted in the report through heavily subsidizing their suppliers and producers. Another predatory practice is that the CCP officials would lure Western companies to collaborate with Chinese companies and then sell their Chinese products below the market prices. This was to put Western competition out of business. Now, they also made use of a legal framework that gave the regime the ability to raise and lower prices to favor its national security interests. Now, this is an issue that officials have known about for quite some time, Steph, but the impact became more evident after the trade war started and CCP officials imposed export controls over critical minerals that are used in everyday products like electronics, medical equipment, you name it. But notably, military and defense gear, the production of those uses those critical minerals. Now, the group of bipartisan investigators predict that Chinese miners are expected to continue dominating this industry through 2030. As previously described by one congressman, this is our single greatest strategic vulnerability. Listen to what one of the congressmen on this committee said about it.
Since 2010, we have known that Western countries like the United States are dangerously dependent on China for critical minerals and rare earths. We have known that China is able and willing to weaponize its chokehold on critical minerals against adversaries like the United States. Despite knowing these dangers, the U.S. is no closer to achieving critical mineral independence than we were 15 years ago.
Now, Steph, as for how the U.S. should move forward here, the committee made a few suggestions. One is to appoint a critical mineral czar. Trump is already preparing to do this. They also propose creating a strategic resources reserve similar to the Federal Oil Reserve. The committee also wants to create a critical minerals tax credit to encourage more production here in the U.S. But with that said, the U.S. also needs to strengthen its capacity to mine for minerals and expedite permits, which is a big piece of the equation that's been really difficult to do over the years due to pushback from environmental groups. Mining and recovery efforts discuss how to expedite permits while keeping those important safeguards in place to protect the environment. There will be a hearing next week on Capitol Hill diving into this topic specifically, so be watching out for that and have more details for you on that next week. Thank you.
Very important national security issue, Melina, and we have seen President Trump in recent months trying to increase deals with allied countries as well on this issue with trade. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Melina Wisecup. And next up, a scam center strike force has been launched to target crypto fraudsters who the U.S. Attorney for D.C. says are backed by Chinese organized crime. Here's Janine Pirro.
The consequence of these scams are devastating. Older Americans in particular are targets of these scams, many of them lonely, many of them looking to speak to someone who communicates with them. Their entire life savings gone. Their retirement funds gone, left with no opportunity to go back into the workforce and to re-earn money.
Pirro said experts estimate that last year alone, Americans were scammed out of more than $9 billion from crypto fraud.
And that's based on underreported numbers. She explained how the fraud usually works. A scammer will reach out through text or social media, gain the person's confidence and trust, and then convince them to invest.
Pirro said that's why they've launched a scam center strike force to take down and recover stolen funds.
She said they have the authority to charge foreign defendants and seize foreign property even. So far, Pirro said they have seized more than $400 million, and additional actions now are underway, which will lead to the forfeit of $80 million more.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. The Department of Homeland Security has announced that ICE arrested 230 illegal immigrants in Florida and says 150 of them are sex offenders.
Also, a look at how DHS has been responding to ongoing accusations that they're arresting U.S. citizens during normal operations. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says that 150 illegal immigrant sex offenders were arrested during a DHS operation in Florida. The sweep was called Operation Criminal Return.
These individuals were sex offenders, but not just sex offenders. They targeted children. These 150 individuals will be gone off of our streets. Our kids will be safer.
Noem says that the operation happened with the partnership of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and is a model the DHS wants to replicate across the country. And the DHS has recently reported an 8,000% increase on attacks and death threats to their personnel, and ongoing protests have been happening around the country against ICE since June. The agency is also facing ongoing accusations that American citizens are being targeted or accidentally arrested during immigration enforcement operations. Last month, Governor Pritzker alleged that children were zip-tied and American citizens were detained for hours during a raid at a Chicago apartment building.
Go after them, not the 130 people. Instead, they took everybody out of the building. They zip-tied the kids. They took some of the seniors and put them into U-Hauls for hours, and many of them U.S. citizens.
The DHS responded, calling the claim that children were zip-tied a hoax, and that it's normal protocol across all law enforcement to briefly detain non-threats during certain operations. The department said individuals encountered were briefly and safely held, a standard practice for all law enforcement for their own safety and the safety of law enforcement as they carry out these dangerous operations. Securing non-targets decreases the likelihood of that danger and protects all involved. In July, an ICE officer responded to claims that ICE doesn't have premeditated targets and are just randomly driving around.
We have our targets, we know who we're going to pick up, and we have our plan beforehand. We don't just go out there and look for anybody.
Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you, Jason. Next, a staff member for a U.S. senator is accused of claiming to be a lawyer and falsifying an official form to get an illegal immigrant released from custody. The Department of Homeland Security shared security video of the accused staffer who works for Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois. In a post on X, the department said the staffer claimed to be a lawyer for a 40-year-old illegal immigrant and falsified an official DHS document to get him released. A letter sent to Duckworth's office identified the staffer as Edward York. It also noted that the immigrant York was trying to get released had been deported to Mexico multiple times and has a DUI conviction. The letter requests a response from the senator's office by next week. Her office has not publicly responded so far.
And thousands of commercial truck licenses are being revoked in California after a federal audit revealed several violations. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy demanded the action, calling the state's licensing system a threat to public safety. NTD's Christina Corona brings us more from California.
California has revoked 17,000 commercial truck driver licenses that were illegally issued to non-domiciled drivers. The move comes after a demand from Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy in September. A federal audit found that 1 in 4 non-domiciled licenses in California were issued without meeting federal requirements, and some were valid longer than the driver's work permit allowed.
So in plain English, this is a license to operate a massive 80,000-pound truck that's being issued to foreign drivers who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. The process for issuing these licenses is absolutely 100% broken.
The Department of Transportation says California's DMV violated federal regulations. In a post on X, Duffy accused Governor Gavin Newsom's administration of being caught red-handed after weeks of claiming they had done nothing wrong. Earlier this year, Duffy called several state systems a serious danger for travelers and announced 2 immediate steps.
Here's the bottom line. Non-citizens will not be eligible for a CDL unless they meet a much stricter set of rules. Second, all states must immediately pause the issuance of non-domiciled CDLs until they can comply with our new rules.
Notices have now been sent out to all affected drivers, and their licenses will expire within 60 days. Meanwhile, Nevada is taking steps to comply with the federal rule. The state DMV announced it will phase out non-domiciled or limited-term commercial driver's licenses and learner's permits, pausing new issuance and its renewals immediately. About 980 drivers statewide will be affected, and existing licenses will expire naturally based on their lawful stay. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And 84-year-old civil rights leader Reverend Jesse Jackson was hospitalized yesterday, according to the Chicago-based Rainbow Push Coalition, which Jackson helped found. The organization said Jackson has been managing a neurodegenerative condition for more than a decade. Reverend Jackson has been a leader of the U.S. civil rights movement since the 1960s and fought for the rights of Black Americans alongside his mentor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was present when King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968. The Rainbow Push Coalition is a merger between People United to Save Humanity, a group Jackson founded in 1971 to continue Dr. King's work, and a coalition he formed after his first unsuccessful run for the Democratic presidential nomination back in 1984.
A federal appeals panel heard arguments yesterday about whether a law that ended Medicaid reimbursements for Planned Parenthood can remain in effect while legal challenges continue. NTD's Arlene Richards has that story.
A three-judge panel of the First Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments on Wednesday to consider whether to temporarily block a federal law that ended Medicaid reimbursements to health centers that provide abortions. Planned Parenthood is suing Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and others with claims that the new law, which became active in September, violates the Equal Protection Clause of the First Amendment. They claim their clinics provide services to low-income populations, and the provision could force them to shut down or reduce their offerings.
Congress defunded Planned Parenthood using a set of tailor-made criteria intended to exclude Planned Parenthood and only Planned Parenthood from the Medicaid program.
The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed into law in July, includes a provision that bars federal funds from being used to provide abortions. Nonprofits like Planned Parenthood that received more than $800,000 in federal funding in 2023 are prohibited from receiving Medicaid reimbursements for 1 year.
Even before Dobbs returned the issue of abortion to the political process, Congress may make a value judgment favoring childbirth over abortion and implement that value judgment by the allocation of public funds.
An appeals court judge in August granted the government's request to pause a lower court's preliminary injunction that had blocked the law until after court proceedings would be completed. The judge did not hear oral arguments. The panel will now consider whether to reactivate the lower court's injunction. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A former top aide to California Governor Gavin Newsom has been indicted on 23 federal charges tied to a political corruption and money laundering scheme. Prosecutors say Newsom's former chief of staff, Dana Williamson, and several co-conspirators helped divert $225,000 from a dormant campaign account belonging to former Health Secretary Javier Becerra. That money allegedly ended up in an associate's personal account. The indictment also accuses Williamson of falsifying business records and tax filings, claiming personal luxury purchases and private jet flights as business expenses. Williamson yesterday pleaded not guilty in federal court in Sacramento. She was released under conditions including surrendering her passport and avoiding contact with co-conspirators. Governor Gavin Newsom's office said Williamson no longer works for his administration and has emphasized that all public servants must uphold the highest standards of integrity. If convicted, Williamson faces up to 20 years in prison for each count of bank and wire fraud, along with additional penalties for obstruction and false statements. Toyota has officially opened its $14 billion lithium-ion battery plant in Liberty, North Carolina.
Construction on the plant began in 2021, and it's now ready to start production.
The 7 million square foot facility sits on 1,800 acres in rural Randolph County and will eventually employ more than 5,000 workers.
It's Toyota's first battery production facility outside Japan, and it will produce batteries for hybrid and all-electrical vehicles, including the Camry, the Corolla, and the RAV4, as well as a new three-row SUV.
Toyota says it will invest another $10 billion over the next 5 years to expand U.S. manufacturing.
Governor Josh Stein hailed the project as the largest corporate investment in the state's history. And a Chinese researcher in Michigan has pleaded guilty to smuggling a dangerous crop fungus from China and lying about it to U.S. officials. 33-year-old Jian Yunqing admitted to bringing in a pathogen that devastates wheat and barley crops from China. Last year, the fungus caused billions of dollars in damage to American farmers between 1998 and 2000. Jian was sentenced to time served and will be deported after spending 5 months in custody. Prosecutors say she was part of a wider network of Chinese researchers that were smuggling in biological materials through the University of Michigan. In a letter to the court, Jian apologized, saying she wanted to find ways to protect crops from the disease and was under pressure to produce results.
For several years, relations between Europe and China have cooled. Yet some countries have deepened ties with Beijing, facing growing risks of dependence, especially through China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Lawmakers from across the bloc gathered in Brussels to discuss the challenges arising from partnerships with the Chinese Communist Party. NTD International correspondent David Vives reports.
While the EU as a whole is moving toward gradual de-risking from Beijing, several countries, such as Spain and Hungary, have recently reinforced ties with China through Belt and Road projects, underlining the bloc's difficulty in uniting. With the Eurozone experiencing slow economic growth and facing serious issues regarding energy sources and rare earth minerals supply, some member states are looking for alternative solutions. At the Interparliamentary Alliance on China last week in Brussels, legislators from across Europe highlighted some countries' dependence on China. Patterns of Chinese Communist Party influence, often at the expense of national interests, emerged as members of IPAC discussed the challenges their countries face in relations with Beijing. Scottish politician Stuart MacDonald said there is a lack of awareness in Scotland about the long-term risks of deals made with China.
We have an issue in the energy sector, particularly the renewable energy sector, very heavy over-reliance on China there. We have an over-reliance on China in our higher education sector, particularly our universities, which have become so dependent on the funds that come from the large volumes of students from China.
He said one example is how China's state-owned PetroChina has a stake in Scotland's critical energy sector. While PetroChina decided to close its oil refinery in the country, experts know that Scotland no longer controls how its energy is produced or regulated. Due to several factors, Scotland now has some of the highest energy costs in Europe.
We've just closed our last remaining oil refinery, 50% owned by PetroChina. Scotland is unique in that it is an oil-producing country with no oil refinery. This is madness, and the result of that has been quite an enormous hit to our economy nationally, very big hit to that economy locally with the loss of hundreds of jobs. But we had in Grangemouth, which is the name of the oil refinery that closed down, a huge stake from PetroChina. That should never have been allowed to happen.
Smaller countries also voiced concerns that the Chinese Communist Party takes advantage of large loans accepted by their governments. Members of parliament from Balkan countries such as Bosnia-Herzegovina and North Macedonia said they are facing similar challenges with Chinese investments.
They have been financing the building of a new coal factory in Tuzla region in the north of Bosnia-Herzegovina, 613 million euros. Also providing laws for different infrastructural projects, strategic energy, road, transportation infrastructure. So we see their growing influence and are not really aware of what it will cost us in the future.
Gov't says beyond economic issues, there might be threats to democracy as well, as the Chinese Communist Party does not respect democratic processes and could impose political narratives and agendas to the country's legislature.
I think what they are trying to show is that a non-democratic model would also work under the circumstances that the Western Balkans are currently in between, getting more integrated into the Western world, as we call it, and the Western standards. So I think they're trying to show, well, this might work for you, but I don't think it really would ever work.
The proposed solution is to diversify supply sources, reduce global dependence on China, and strengthen unity among EU countries using legislative tools. David Vives, NTD News, Brussels.
A very important story from our French reporter, David Vives.
And coming up, eating green veggies and natural grains, is it really as healthy as we think it is? We'll take a closer look with a doctor for his take on what food is better for you after this. Welcome back. The penny is suffering the same fate as the dodo bird or the 8-track player.
Oh my goodness, yeah, after 238 years, the U.S. has minted its last 1-cent coin. The U.S. Treasurer comments on the phase-out.
The cost savings of ending penny production will save the American taxpayer approximately $56 million a year in just production cost alone. Although today we say goodbye to the continued production of our copper 1-cent coin, let me be crystal clear. The penny remains legal tender. We have over 300 billion pennies that remain in circulation, and we encourage you to use them.
Earlier this year, President Trump announced that he ordered the nation to stop making the penny, saying that each one costs nearly 4 cents to create.
Other coins, including the nickel, dime, and quarter, will remain in circulation.
Although the penny already seems obsolete to some consumers, its removal is causing problems for some merchants who will now have to round up prices either up or down.
And dropping the penny will create a greater need for nickels, which are a more expensive coin to mint.
Gen Z has seen its credit scores drop more than any other generation over the past year by 3 points on average, according to FICO. What's driving the trend and what can be done about it? We're joined now by Lawrence Sprung, founder of Midland Financial and the author of Financial Planning Made Personal. Good to have you with us this morning, Lawrence, as always. Let's start with why this is happening.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing is rising delinquencies on credit cards. People are using much more heavily than we've ever seen buy now and pay later loans. And you combine that with a higher cost of living, and I think all of those pressures are taking a toll. But there is good news. I mean, even though there's this disrepair to the credit scores that they're going down, it's not permanent. And if you put in some real minor smart habits, you can really turn things around quickly.
Let's take a look at that. What can young people in particular do to fix their credit scores?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is you have to be very mindful of, missed payments and balances. I think that those are very important. And, paying on time, and not just, when you feel like it, but paying on time every time is so important, because your payment history, your on-time payments make up over 35% of your credit score, your FICO. So even one minor late payment can simply drop your score by 60 to 100 points. So, what you want to do is create those consistencies with those on-time payments. And if you haven't done that, start that today, and you'll be on the track to rebuilding that credit for sure.
Do you have any tips for making those payments on time? I mean, you can automate it, but behind that, there's quite a bit of prioritization going on, I presume.
Yeah, you have to make sure that you're making those payments. I think, we talk a lot about budget on, when we've been on the show, and I talk about budget very heavily. It's important that you make sure that before the charge or the expense goes on the credit card, it's within your budget. So when then the time comes to make the payment on time, you could then make the payment. So they all work in tandem with each other. Create a budget that you can afford, stay within the budget, only put those charges on the credit card that when the bill drops, you're going to be able to pay.
And to this point about budgeting and looking ahead, there is another solution here in building up your credit in terms of how much you spend of your credit limit. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the second, big piece of your credit score is what they call on your credit report utilization. So just because you have the credit available to you, they're looking at how much are you utilizing. So if you have $1,000 credit limit and you're using 100% $1,000, that's going to hit your credit score more harshly than if you are not using as much. So what you want to try to do is use less than 30% of your available credit. And that shows the credit agency that although you have it, you're not using everything and you're only using it when you need it. So I think those two things, paying on time and that credit utilization, are two things that we have a lot of control over and can help us keep our scores higher.
And to try to solve this credit utilization issue, some people may be tempted to open new credit lines. How does that play into things?
Yeah, so be very mindful and careful of that, right? Just don't go opening up, credit limits wherever you want. Every time you see a credit option or, an option to create a credit card, be mindful that you are going to be graded more or less on the utilization. So as long as the cards you have are effective for you and your needs, just stick with those. There's no need to add additional cards because that's just going to up your credit limit and then potentially, impact your utilization as well.
And you mentioned the buy now, pay later deals that you can get. What else can we learn about that to help with the credit scores?
Yeah. So buy now, pay later is something that is, it could be a very effective and helpful tool, especially some of them you buy now, you pay by a certain date. You may not even pay any interest, but the important thing is you have to pay by that date. And as long as you do, you don't pay any interest. But if you don't, then it goes interest back to day one. Here's the troubling thing for most people that they may or may not realize. Many of these services, which they didn't do long ago when they first started, but they now report to credit bureaus. So having multiple short-term loans or even like new cards can temporarily lower your score. So make sure you're spacing out these buy now, pay laters. Just don't go out and furnish the whole living room with 3 different retailers, 3 different buy now, pay laters, because you can end up in trouble then.
Okay, final remarks, Lawrence. Why it matters to have a good credit score.
Yeah, so your credit score is probably one of the most important numbers that you have. You want to build it, use it, monitor it, but you have to think of your credit score like a financial GPA. It's a grade. It follows you everywhere. And by paying on time and keeping those balances low, you can save hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on things like car loans, things like your mortgage. It could be the difference of anywhere between $5,000 more in interest on a 5-year car loan for somebody that has fair credit versus excellent. And in the same vein, on a 30-year mortgage, it could be $70,000 difference between having fair and excellent credit. So keep that GPA high and keep that credit excellent.
Good credit, important for everyone, but especially for young people who are just setting up their lives and need to get everything in order. Thank you so much, Lawrence Brown. Good to speak with you as always.
Same.
And still to come, Thanksgiving is time to be with the loved ones, relax, and have some great food. But it also has the potential to bring challenges and stresses of all sorts for children and adults.
That's right, but we're going to be speaking with Dr. Dale Atkins, psychologist and author, who will share her tips on giving thanks like a pro. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Very excited for that, yeah. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Thanksgiving, favorite time of the year, and it's time to be with loved ones, enjoy rest and great food. Yet it can also bring challenges, stresses for both children and adults.
But joining us with tips and advice for all of that is Dr. Dale Atkins, psychologist and the author of a new children's book, The Turquoise Butterfly, a story that captures the beauty of love, nature, courage, grief, and transformation. What a beautiful description. I'd love to hear more about your new book and also tips and tricks you have for celebrating Thanksgiving.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. And About the turquoise butterfly, it is a book about all the things you mentioned, and one of the things that is so important about the book is to understand that we are all intergenerationally related and connected. The connection is in the book between a grandmother and her granddaughter, and the granddaughter's a little bit anxious and the grandmother's very bold, and it's really how they blend and how they learn from each other. And I think it's a great segue for a conversation about Thanksgiving, because so many people are with their families on Thanksgiving, hopefully intergenerationally, and there's so much we can do to try and avoid some of the stresses that you referred to, but also deal with them in a way that if we can put aside perfection and just work on connection and how we can stay connected and what we can do to enjoy each other by sharing stories and talking about the past and looking towards the future, but really being connected. And that's, I think, what Thanksgiving is really about. It's about gratitude, and it's not about whether everything is perfect.
I love
Although I
that.
must say, this set is so perfect and beautiful. I wish my table looked like this.
Dr. Dale. Now, I think what you said really resonates with me because I have teenagers now, and there are certain things that, I just can't say that maybe, a grandparent can say in a way that I can't. And when it comes to Thanksgiving, it's a lot like the football games that we'll be watching, in that you're either home or you're away. And so we want to get your tips in prepping for Thanksgiving. So let's start with, if you're the home team, you're the one hosting, you don't have to get in the car, but you do have a lot of pressures. And so how should people prep, not just for themselves as the adults hosting, but maybe for the children that are in the family as well?
I love that question, because if you're the home team, then you want to make everybody feel comfortable. You want them to feel at home. But you may be so busy and anxious about what's going on in the kitchen that you forget about, again, the real meaning. And of course, you want the turkey cooked, but everything doesn't have to be as it is in a photograph. And one of the things you can do is you can have all of the children have a job. So you can pair somebody intergenerationally if someone's with you who's from another generation, and you can say, you two are responsible for setting the table. You two are responsible for doing the decorations. You three are responsible for laying the table, for putting out the, the plates and everything. And the other thing is, I think what's important is to do as much as you can in advance. And then when people come, understand that everybody comes with everything that's on their own shoulders. So they were in traffic, or there was a problem. You can have a calm space when they arrive, and you can leave everything outside, and you can have an activity like, we were talking about Great Aunt Sue, and we're making her recipe. And what do you remember about the dinners we had with Great Aunt Sue? So you immediately start with a story. You immediately start with a connection, and try and have the baggage stay outside. The other thing when you're hosting is everybody has to know where everything is. Be sure that guests know where they are welcome to go and where they're not welcome to go. If you're not comfortable with kids in a certain part of the house, you just have to tell the parents that this is off limits today so that you're not nervous. But most of the house is going to be available for everybody. If there are lots of kids, have toys, have playbooks, like crayons and coloring books. Or one of the things I like to suggest is to make a gratitude tree, a Thanksgiving tree. So you have a little tree and you have little leaves, and everybody writes something on the leaves that they're grateful for, and then you put them at people's tables, at their seats. These kinds of things make people feel at home.
Oh, gorgeous.
You can also encourage them to bring photographs, and then you look at them. If you go to somebody else's house, if you're the away team, then bring something, hopefully something that they want. If they've talked to you beforehand, could you bring the pie? Could you bring the cake? Or bring something that you think people would like to remember. Like you could bring something that was your mother's, that used to be at all the tables, and you say, I brought this and I wanted to share with you so that we would all remember this person.
Such a beautiful, peaceful environment that you're painting in
I want to go to this house.
I know. Could you invite me over to? Yeah. So, but for all the families that are coming, they're traveling, they're bringing their kids. What do you suggest for them to help contribute to that environment?
Well, I think it's, some people say, I want to do everything my way, but really it's so nice when people can contribute because it makes it a little easier for the host. It also makes them feel as if they are doing something, and everybody likes to do something to help. And they also like to see something on the table that's theirs. So if you say to the children, bring 3 photographs of people that you love, and then you put them on the table, and then you talk about those people who maybe live far away and they aren't with us today. or you tell the kids beforehand that we're going to focus on everybody doing a little reading about something that they're grateful for, and the kids can come prepared with a story or a poem or something that they wrote, and then they're highlighted. And everybody needs to feel important at Thanksgiving. And I think that the other issue is, what are we really grateful for? When you're at the table, whether you're home or away, perhaps you can ask an older member of the family to give a blessing or to recall a memory of when they were young. And then a younger person who's at the table, because I think everybody needs to be included and feel important, can offer maybe some music that they like. I also want to mention something about music that we started doing. When you have lots of people from different generations, a nice thing to do is to have music from each generation, and you might have whatever person's favorite song was. So at this holiday, there isn't really a song. Most holidays have songs affiliated with them.
right.
And you can make your own playlist, and you can have songs from everybody. And it just lightens the mood. It also helps you to stay focused on what you're connected with, not what separates you.
And then you can share the playlist, which you can just do through a text message, which is super fun.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to talk turkey, though, because
Okay,
at the end of the day, it's about the meal is the star of the show. It's what brings us all around the table together, or at the kids' table, however you're set up. And that could, in itself, bring a lot of stress. Some people are pros, and they're able to just keep 30 things going all at the same time. But what tips do you have for hosts and guests to really help with the Thanksgiving meal and the dessert?
Well, I think bringing things, and also making as much beforehand as you can, and then so you really have most of the prep. But the other thing is, put aside the need to be perfect. I said that at the very beginning, and it's not about perfection. And again, as long as it's cooked through, it's good enough. And ask someone who's very talented to maybe decorate around the platter. So when you get the turkey on the platter, get somebody in the family who's very artistic and put things around it. I think that sharing the engagement with the meal is important. And I think the other thing that's really helpful is to get kids involved in helping to maybe light the candles at the beginning, maybe to say whatever it is that would make them feel involved. I also think that it's important to kind of calm yourself before people come, and whatever you do for that, to take breaths, to take breaks, to every time every time you go into the kitchen, take a breath, remind yourself of what you're grateful for, and then go back out, so that you are reducing the stress level throughout the day. And if something gets you upset, just sit there and breathe and say, I can deal with this later, or I don't have to deal with it at all. No one has to be at 100% during these family gatherings. It's always challenging, and we have this picture perfect in our mind. Rarely is that the case, but that doesn't mean that it can't be lovely, enjoyable, and something that you will remember for a really long time for the good things.
Dr. Dale Atkins, psychiatrist, as well as the author of the new book, the children's book, The Turquoise Butterfly. Thank you for these tips. So timely.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you. And we do have to round up our show right now. But for round-the-clock original news coverage, you can always visit us at ntd.com/live, or you can use our NTD app.
I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dodds. We'll see you soon. Take care. So great. So much great advice stocked into such a short window.